Greetings and welcome to Get the Tea with Buta. I'm your host, Buta Biberaj, and today I am in the company of Nick Gothard. Nick is our director, and he's the all-knowing and all-doing individual that makes our show possible. We've had an opportunity to always have guests on our show who really are making changes in our communities. Today we have the honor of having with us Copeland Burchenal. Copeland is an individual who saw a need within a special community during our dealing with the pandemic. He addressed it, he has looked into it, and he's wanting to share that experience with us so that we can also see how other communities have been impacted by COVID. So, Copeland, welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me.
It is absolutely our pleasure. So we didn't warn you earlier, but now the first thing that we end up doing is to make sure that our guests are comfortable is we mess with you a little bit to understand that, yeah, you're in trouble and you are at our mercy. So for starters you indicated to me that you wanted me to make sure that I pronounce your name Burchenal. So why don't you tell us what your real name is?
When I'm in French class, the real name comes out. It's Copeland Burchenal, so something a little spicier than just that hard CH right in the middle of it.
Yeah,
so,
that's funny. Sorry, go ahead.
No, please. I just try to turn it around, give it a little pizzazz.
Yeah. As I said, that's what we have to do when we bring these international names to the communities, is you have to sometimes once in a while just kind of concede the fact that it may be a little bit challenging, and then you do try to simplify it. So we will go ahead and go forward with that, because I'm just glad my last name is Smith, so it works all the time for me too.
I mean, we can't all have a name like Nick Gothard,
I know. Look at that. Exactly. Currently, are you in school? Like not
yes.
Today, but just right. Which school are you attending?
Lewis and Clark College. That's actually how I met Nick. On the, I think, second day of class, we had a cup of coffee in a mutual friends room together. Back then, he had just very blonde hair. It was quite magnificent.
Wow. I was going to joke you guys about in class, but now I want to talk about hair.
Yeah, I mean, he's always had great hair. Part of me is like kind of emulated it a little more so nowadays than back in freshman year. It's just,
I'm liking that.
He's got a good thing going on.
Thank you. Yeah, and especially since you're emulating, I think you're also self-complimenting, but I'm going to let that one slide.
Yeah, I try to slip in something there for myself as well. Hope nobody notices.
You got to do it, I'm telling you. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Missoula, Montana. Initially, I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, but my family moved out to Montana when I was about 4 or 5, and we've been there ever since.
Okay. And what type of area is Missoula?
Missoula is the second largest city in Montana. It sits at around currently 70,000. Surprisingly, during the pandemic, its population has been skyrocketing, along with most of Montana. And so it's like a really, really small Portland. It's got a lot of liberal roots in it, a big art scene, but it's also at that intersection of ranching, farming, outdoor recreation, a ton of hippies. So it's a pretty laid back place, but there's plenty of saloons you can go to there as well.
Can I see your ID? Because I don't know if I've ever known anybody in your era actually say hippies. So I just wanted I didn't know that was still in common usage, but I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have my wallet on me right now, but I swear to God, it's Montana.
That's pretty awesome. What year are you at school?
I am, what year am I? I'm a third year. Yes, I am a third year, and I study environmental, what do I do? I'm an environmental studies major, and then I also do a lot of international affairs as well.
Very cool. So now last year would have been obviously your second year in college. How were you impacted by COVID school-wise?
Absolutely. I mean, school-wise, I was, looking at it from a purely grade standpoint, it didn't do a lot of favors for my GPA. I've always struggled with a little tinge of ADHD. So, being on a computer and trying to focus on a professor who's the size of like a Post-it stamp. Just, that really hurt, and so but from the personal standpoint, it was very shocking. I was kind of following the pandemic before it had really come to America. And so, you see it, circling in China, and then all that news about Italy. And then finally a case cropped up. One of the first 20 cases in America cropped up in Lake Oswego, which is just down the road from Lewis and Clark at I think an elementary school. So when I saw that, you're just really, it feels like there's very dark clouds coming over, and I'm sure everybody felt that way. And then once we got the news to evacuate, there was a big snowstorm, chaos. I remember Nick got taken to the hospital, and a lot of my friends were like, "Oh my God, he's gonna die from COVID." But yeah, and then I went home to Montana, and I was there till June, and then I moved back, and it's just been on and off at school. But yeah, generally not a great time.
Yeah. And I'm sorry that you guys had that experience interfere with what we would call your college experience, because I know it strayed away from what you normally would have expected, and also would have been a nice transition into your adulting.
Yeah,
But this also forced you, Copeland, in a sense, to take a different direction than what you otherwise thought you would be doing during your sophomore and junior year. Tell us a
absolutely.
little bit as to with your interest. You're saying that you were monitoring and tracking it. What piqued your interest? Like, why were you even paying attention to it? Because we're talking about somebody in college. The only thing you're worried about is like how much is a pitcher of beer. Why is this now why was it then your interest?
Um, I've always had a deep fascination with I don't want to say natural disasters because it's not exactly, but it's in a health sense, a pandemic is a natural disaster. And so for me, I've always been very interested in storm cycles, forest fires, and how the environment interacts with humanity. And so the 1918 pandemic, that was always a topic which was very interesting to me, just to see how America and the world at large reacted. And so disease also became, as a whole, also became very interesting for me. And so international affairs, that also popped in there as well. So a lot of my classes would have me just looking at the news, looking at what's going on in Iraq, what's going on in Venezuela, how's the EU dealing with this economic problem. And so a lot of that started to focus more and more on, okay, what are we about to do if this disease that we're seeing in China starts to blow up and we have to deal with it? And so I was keeping tabs on that from an international affairs aspect. And then it really started to just become really all I ever read about. I will admit that in a couple of my more boring classes, I would sit on my computer and I just read news about it. And so I don't know, it's just always been something very interesting for me.
So, having that interest, did you then end up participating in any activities that actually put you on the front of having to deal with COVID?
Yes, I took my fall semester, fall 2020. I took that off and I worked on the ambulances on the Northern Cheyenne Indian Reservation. And I was a supplementary EMT for them. And so I was transporting patients. I did a lot of nasal swabs. I was on the front line. Yeah.
What made you want to do that?
Um, I initially, funnily enough, I had wanted to help with forest fires that were going on in California and Oregon, because last year was record breaking by all aspects. And when I realized that logistically that was going to be very difficult, I still felt, well, there's so many crises going on right now. I wouldn't be able to focus on school anyway if I tried to blur it all out to try to get back to work. And I just felt like it was kind of my duty to help. I became a licensed EMT the summer before that. And I just felt that with the lack of fresh meat, to throw at the problem, we just needed bodies in the field a lot of the time. I felt that I was in a really good position to do that. And so I jumped on with I think the Montana Mutual Aid healthcare system. They had sent me an email the previous March. So right as quarantine began, they said, we have you listed as a licensed EMT in Montana. We were wondering if you'd like to sign up for that. And so essentially what it is it just it's a volunteer program. Of course, I got paid as well, but and then you just put in your licenses, your accolades, whatever, your skill set. And then when something crops up that they say, okay, we're going to need more medical people for this, so they can look at all the people who are nurses, doctors, paramedics, all those guys, and they can just email them all and say, hey, we need more help, over in Wolf Point, or we need more help in Lame Deer, or we need more help here and there. And then you get sent over there. You're working with National Guard. You're working with other people in that field. You're working with the locals, the local healthcare system. And so you're just kind of plucked and you're just kind of tossed in.
So I know Nick was working with the system here in Virginia as far as making sure that individuals can sign up to get the vaccine early on, and making sure that that system was working through that. So Nick, at any point in time, obviously, I apologize, I'm hogging up the conversation, but did you find that there was a good synergy and collaboration of the different systems to really try to meet the needs of the locals?
I would say it was the best it could have been. I thought the Montana Department of Health, I think they did kind of a knockout job in setting up that system in particular to try and get supplementary EMTs into the field. The number one problem for that was that even though there were huge economic incentives, you were getting paid $20 an hour just to like be out there, and you got a per diem, you got paid for mileage, you were given a hotel room to sleep in. But at a certain point, I think I was maybe one of less than 10 EMTs working in the entire state as supplementaries. So there was a huge lack of people. The system was there. And then also the other aspect was the CARES Act funding stopped on January 1st. And that was when that second or third wave, however many waves we've been hit by, was really kicking up, was right in January. And that's when the funding disappeared. And so even if a lot of people were willing to help at that point, there was no way they could do that. But generally, yeah, I mean, I think so. I'm a bit of this was the first time I'd ever worked on an ambulance. And so you're getting thrown in with a lot of hardened veterans. And so I would say one of the learning curves is just like learning to toughen up, because, I would get a lot of flack for being like this, little white kid from Missoula, Montana, who was getting sent in to help. I did the best I could. I was just there to fill up. Well, the reason I was sent wasn't because that they felt that people there weren't ill-equipped, or it's not that they felt the people there were ill-equipped or that they didn't have enough people, but they didn't have enough people. Hold on. Now this is all, we're able to cut this part out, right? No, it's live. All right.
Stuff. This is the fun stuff. This is what we set you up. We wait 40 minutes for people to do this, and you're right at 22 minutes. We're good.
This is, oh my God. Yeah. Okay. Hold on. Let me gather my thoughts. When you've only got 15, 16 people to deal with 900 COVID cases, there's going to be some severe burnout, because a lot of these people were going in 7, 14, 21 days in a row. I knew a lot of guys who worked 128-hour shifts, which is insane, before they were even able to like get a night off. And a lot of times when you had a night off, you were still on call. So if the two people at the station, because there were only really two people there at a time, if they were out on a call and another call came in, you would get the station would call you at 4 a.m. and they would say, hey, you need to come in right now. We've got an emergency going on. And, somebody like, slipped and banged their knee. Well, it's your job. You are legally obligated to pick that phone up, to put on your pants, and you got to drive down to the station. You got to get on a rig. You got to go deal with somebody screaming and crying, getting vomit everywhere, getting blood all over you. And so that just creates some really harsh burnout. And so the reason I was there, and the reason a lot of EMTs were also sent there, was to try and prevent that burnout. And then the other aspect is that they were working such an insane amount of overtime that it would literally bankrupt the ambulance station. And so I was there to soak up some of that overtime that other people would be working, because the ambulance station didn't have to pay me because I was being paid by FEMA. So I could work as much overtime as they needed me to work. So I was there. I was never there for 128 hours, but I was there for a lot of 36-hour shifts. I did 800 hours over the course of 2 months. So I was working between 100 and 120 hours a week. And so that was my whole thing. And so, when you're taking people's overtime, they don't really like you. And so, I did the best I could, though.
Well, for starters, all joking aside, as far as the OT and things of that nature, thank you for choosing to do that and be an assistant. Because as you said, one is you are helping, I didn't do a daggone thing. You were helping maintain somebody's sanity, as well as them being fresh enough to do the job right. Because at the end of the day, maybe the OT is awesome, but if people are exhausted, then more mistakes are being made than not. So we want to make sure that that's the situation. You're never having been on an ambulance before. What were your expectations before you started? Like, what did you think you would be doing?
Initially, I really thought it was going to be a lot more uniform than it is. When you think about emergency response systems, the thing that comes to my mind first is like very neat and organized, very tidy, very on time, very put together. And once you get into that, you realize that things are not organized. And that's probably also and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like I would say there's not really any human created structure which is perfectly organized. And so once you get in there, especially when you're not an actual technical employee, you're just kind of filling in the cracks. And so I thought it was going to be a lot more, okay, I'm working Monday to Friday, I get the 2 days off, but that's not how it goes. It's like, hey, I was thinking about going into town. No chance. We got another call coming in, or we need more people here. You got to stay. And so you just kind of fit in life, in the seams. So, I was eating a lot of Jimmy Dean breakfast sandwiches. I was drinking a lot of Go-Gurts. I had a lot of baby carrots. And then I was working the night shift a lot. And so, you drag your carcass off, the work. I'd go get breakfast, and I'd go take a nap, and then I'd just kind of wait around until they called me again. And then I'd go back, at 6 p.m., sunset, roll over there. I guess the other aspect, when I anticipated I was going to be doing was I got there right after one of the worst waves to hit them. And so I was kind of there in the aftermath. And then also being green, it was really my first experiences as an EMT working in a pandemic, doing 120 hours in a week. It was really not a great introduction, especially because there's only so much you can do for someone who's about to die. a lot of times, you feel like you just feel like you're the Grim Reaper because you just show up to somebody's house. They can't really breathe. All you can really do is give them oxygen and make them feel good. And then you take them to the hospital, and then, maybe a week later, they're gone. And this one time I showed up to these folks' house, and I picked up an elderly couple, both in their 70s. They could both walk, they could both talk. They were a little short of breath, but nothing bad. They had tested positive the day before. And I got to meet their daughter, who had just lost her husband 2 weeks later. And so we took those two to the hospital, and they were gone within a week. So
Wow.
she lost her parents and her husband. And that's the case for a lot of people, an entire family could just disappear in the matter of like a week. I think I knew of one person who lost everybody. And I mean, it's pretty soul crushing because a lot of those people you got to talk with, you got to meet, because when you're driving from Lame Deer to Billings in the ambulance, it's a 3-hour ride. And so what am I going to do except chat with the person next to me? And I mean, it was really rough. I guess one of the other aspects is, and I can't really, I'm only somebody that got to see it for 2 months, so I'm not really the person to talk to about the culture of the Cheyenne. But another aspect which was brutal is that their language is the Cheyenne language is one that's listed as critically endangered by UNESCO. And so, this disease kills a hell of a lot more old people than it does young people. And so a lot of the culture and history of the tribe is leaving when the ambulance does. Because a lot of the people who spoke that language weren't really able to pass it down to their children or their grandchildren. And so once they're dead, then the language is gone with them. And that was a really hard aspect to watch because you feel like, for every single tribe in North America, they've been so horrifically abused for the past 500 years. And then when you see this pandemic come around, it's just like another kick in the ribs. And I mean, that was pretty tough to just like be in the presence of, I guess.
How did you personally deal with the trauma of being witness to that and knowing that there's but so much that you could do, right? With this pandemic, especially early on, it was almost always a death sentence.
Yeah.
So if you're going to, as you say, you're picking up somebody and having that conversation, what thoughts are going through your mind, and how do you protect yourself from that trauma?
Absolutely. I think one of the aspects of the job which kind of helped you with that unknowingly was the fact that you would drop somebody off and then you're on to the next thing. And so you don't really have a lot of time to sit with it. One of the hardest cases I saw wasn't even COVID related. A woman had really bad gangrene and she died within 12 hours. And that was definitely one of those things where it's just kind of sitting in your brain and you're thinking about it all the time. It's incredibly exhausting. And the way I got through that and the way I've gone through many other sad things that have happened in my life is just I'm a big talker. I love talking with people. I love speaking my mind. And so that made it really easy for me to say, like call a friend, hop on the phone and say, like I just got to talk to you about today. And then as soon as I'm speaking about it, it makes it a little easier. But at a certain point, no amount of TLC, no amount of chatting, no amount of cups of coffee can do anything. And you just gotta suffer. You just gotta deal with the fact that you've watched lots of people die. You've watched lots of families kind of ripped apart. You're watching just this like cataclysmic event roll through the landscape with nothing to stop it. part of the ways I collected my peace during that time was the fact that I would just tell myself like one day it's going to be over. Like, maybe I'm not going to be, maybe it might be in 6 months, it might be in a year, it might be in 5, but one day this isn't going to be happening anymore. And that really helped me. Because like in the moment, you're just kind of looking all around. The hospitals are swamped. The first responders are swamped. And it just feels so hopeless. But it's nice to know that nothing lasts forever. And so that's something that really carried me through that.
So
Now,
as oh, so as
you're
far
good.
as nothing lasts forever, and obviously the development and approval of the vaccines very late in the year, and the distribution of that. What were you working on the ambulance when any of that news about the vaccines either being approved or rolled out occurred?
Yeah, I mean, I was working on the ambulance when it was in like its final phase or something. So it was right there. And I actually left the ambulance a couple weeks before everybody got vaccinated who worked for the station. And so it was one of those things where like, it was definitely one of those godsends because you're like, you're swinging and swinging and swinging, this bloody bare knuckle fist fight. And that, you're like, if we can just make it 1 or 2 more months without a bad wave, the vaccinations will be coming in. And not just for like the general populace, but like I'm sure for a lot of the EMTs I worked with were just older women. There were, I think, 20 people who worked for the Northern Cheyenne Ambulance Service. 3 of them were men, and most of them were women who had been working as responders since they were 18. They came fresh out of high school and they started doing this, and they were the most powerful, incredible bunch of people I've ever met. But the thing is, like when you're 50 or 60, the chances of dying, but the chances of having lasting, brutal side effects from COVID are much higher. And so getting that vaccination for yourself is like a reassurance. So you don't have that like negative weight. Like, what happens if I catch this tomorrow and in 2 weeks I'm dead? That goes away a lot. Of course, it's still there. You can still get COVID when you have vaccination, but your chances of dying are virtually zilch. So I think that was very relieving for them. For me, as I was, I guess, as a 21-year-old working on that, I was definitely a lot less worried, but it's still scary. But it was nice to know that like, hey, we just make it 1 or 2 more months and then we're going to get those vaccinations rolling in and it's going to be a hell of a lot better. Because it was a tribal government, they were getting they get a lot of federal cheese, which is nice. So at no point did we run out, or I believe in the 2 months that I was there, we didn't run out of N95s a single time. And they were kind of priority for the vaccination effort. So those EMTs, those people working for that ambulance service, they got vaccinated very quickly. And then the Northern Cheyenne people on that reservation also got vaccinated pretty quickly.
Did you experience any sort of cultural challenge or limitations from the Cheyenne indicating that they were suspicious or maybe not confident in the vaccinations?
Yeah, probably quite a bit actually. I think one of it is first I'll address the fact that they were sending in a lot of people from Colorado to help with hold on. I'm scattered again. Give me 5 seconds. all the people that were sent there by the state were from the National Guard, and they were from just the supplementary EMT program. And so they were there from out of town. And Native Americans in America don't have a great history with, white people and the American military. And so there was already like a lot of distrust right there.
Right.
I was just like, for me, it was like, I was just this little, some white kid from, from like a hell of a lot more wealthy city than Lame Deer, Montana, which has just a brutal poverty rate. And so there was a lot of there was a lot of distrust in me, and just a lot of people who were there who weren't from the reservation, rightfully so. I can, historically, there's been a lot of bad shit. Am I allowed to swear? Probably
Too
not.
late.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, sorry, Buta.
But you know what they say about forgiveness?
Yeah, okay. I beg forgiveness about that one, but uh, I think a person like me, I can say, oh, well, Pfizer got all of these tests, and they're running the diagnostics, and they're doing all this, and the modern American healthcare system like wants to make sure everybody's healthy, and they want to make sure everybody is safe. But for minorities in America, that hasn't always been the case. I know that in I think the early 20th century, the U.S. military gave a bunch of Black people in the South syphilis just to test it. And so, maybe those systems, maybe the U.S. military doesn't give people syphilis anymore to test it. But, the fact that that happened, the fact that that was a thing in general, means that no matter how decent the system is nowadays, I'm still not going to fully trust it if I'm a Native American, especially from the same guys who 100 years ago were shooting me in the back and burning my town down and forcing me to go on 500-mile walks and sending kids to those boarding schools, up in Canada. That's totally what's happening here as well. And so, I think the vaccination was just another leg of that. They're like, yeah, okay, you say it's pretty good, but you test it. You make sure it's safe. I'm not about to get this first. And so a lot of the EMTs I worked with who were from the reservation, a lot of the people I met on the reservation weren't really that trusting of the vaccination. Not for the same, but they weren't anti-vax. They weren't like, oh, it's a pandemic. They weren't saying there was a mistrust of the vaccination by far right fringe groups, and then this mistrust of the vaccination by ethnic minorities in America. I feel like it's a very different kind of mistrust. I can only come at it from my point of view. So maybe I'm wrong, but that's the vibe I got from working on the reservation.
Right. When I was working in vaccine distribution, earlier this year in Richmond, specifically with vaccine hesitant populations, that's sort of what we commonly ran into, is that general mistrust and sort of the body that's administering it as the government. And you go into a community and you're like, this is safe and it saves lives. And they say, that's what you told us about opioids. And this is, look how that turned out. So I think that you can't treat anti-vax movements, like you said, the same way as this skepticism that's rooted in population abuses. And I think that that's a really big challenge that our government is sort of having to deal with, currently, as they go and administer the vaccine that is relatively new to communities that historically have not placed a lot of trust in the government for good reason previously. So that's a really interesting point of view that I think a lot of people don't think about.
Was that verbalized, Copeland, and even you, Nick, when you were working with the populations that you were trying to schedule or administer vaccinations, that they would verbalize those concerns?
I mean, they weren't verbalizing it and as a succinct, like in such a succinct way as like, I just did, they're not gonna like, I never sat down with somebody and they said, this is why the Cheyenne people don't trust these vaccinations. And, it wasn't like every single Cheyenne person I met didn't trust the vaccinations. Like, most of them did, but it definitely was more, there was a lot more mistrust than like in my hometown. It was definitely done in a more joking manner. Like, a few of the EMTs after everybody was vaccinated, they were like, I'm going to wait a couple weeks, make sure nobody grows like a horn or something. And so it was done in a lot more comical way, because I think one of the things that I noted was that a lot of trauma on the reservation was dealt with in a comedic manner. Because I think at a certain point when so much bad stuff has happened to you, there's not really a lot you can do except just crack a joke about it. And I think the pandemic also became one of those things. And I think that's good. Because like it was like this, it's like this communal way of dealing with it together. It's like, holy shit, everybody's dying and nothing's going to be the same ever again. And finding even a sliver of comedy in that probably was helpful for a lot of people. And I think that's, and so when there was a lot of mistrust in the vaccination, it just became another joke. And it was like a joke that was very lighthearted.
And I think you raise a good point as far as our coping mechanisms. A lot of times in a lot of professions that there is that trauma, we talk that it's, what's that phrase, gallows humor?
Yeah.
Because if somebody outside that circle is listening to you, they're like, you guys are all crazy. But within, that is how you are coping. You're identifying what the concern is, and then you're trying to figure out a way to process it in your brain so that it doesn't crush you.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one of the tougher challenges. Now, you've lived in Wyoming, you said, for a fair amount of your life, right?
Oh, Montana. But yeah,
sorry.
it's pretty much same thing. Don't
Right.
sweat it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we have those issues when we talk about New York, New Jersey. I'm glad you don't have the same struggles. But when you were growing up, you had a certain exposure to what healthcare would be in your community. Did you see as a nation that we're doing right by the people in Cheyenne as far as how we afford them healthcare?
I was actually thinking about this because on one hand, because it is a tribal government, they get a hell of a lot of federal funding, and I think the federal government sometimes is like, wow, that's just a terrible problem. Let's give them just an insane amount of money and see what happens. And I think healthcare on the reservation is a prime example of that, because we had very new ambulances. We had all the N95 masks. We wanted even like everybody on the reservation has like really great healthcare, and it's automatically given to you. But the thing about it, the kicker, was that there was one clinic. It was the health clinic in Lame Deer, Montana. And if you had a problem after 6 p.m. when the radiologist went home, who was the only guy who could run like a X-ray on you, and they decided, okay, well, maybe your heart's looking a little funky right now, or it's like, hey, that arm might be broken. We got to drive you 3 hours to get to the nearest hospital, which has those capabilities. And the thing about that is that an ambulance is going to take you there because you have a problem, but they're not a taxi. They're not going to drive you back. And so a lot of people don't go to the hospital and don't call an ambulance because they have no way of getting back. Like I would drive to work. They put me up in a hotel in Hardin, Montana, just off the res. And then I would drive an hour to work every day. And you would see people walking 40 or 50 miles because it's like, I don't have a car. I can't afford a car and I can't afford a taxi. Like, and so, yeah, it's like, yeah, maybe my case of COVID is bad. Or it's like, yeah, maybe like, my wrist has been swollen for a week, but if they drive me to Billings, there is no way in hell I am ever going to get back home. And so I think,
it's
it's
interesting because
just
that's
like,
not a thought process that you would think when you're talking about ambulances and stuff like that. It is a one direction ride, so to speak. So that's unfortunate.
yeah, it's just like they've got a lot of funding, but the bones are bad. And if the bones are bad, no amount of money, no amount of fancy equipment is going to change anything because it is fundamentally broken. I would, yeah.
Yeah. That's tough. That's really tough. So let's talk a little bit, excuse me, in regards to, with you having had that experience right now, are you still tracking what the virus is dealing with as to whether or not we're expecting a spike from the variant? What are your thoughts, and how are you trying to maintain some sort of observation of that to see what might be coming down the pipe?
Even once I left, I was still like, I'm a big fan of just checking the news. One of my favorite sites is actually, it's called this thing called Worldometer. And so they do a lot of just the hard numbers on death rates, infection rates. You can, they've got all the data from across the world and they synthesize it into their charts, and they do this. So you can look at trends, you can look at where the waves were, and so that's something I check it probably like once or twice a day, I would say. Just, casual, like, check my Instagram, check my Twitter, check on the coronavirus, and so looking at what the Delta variant is doing, it does, it's a little scary. But I think one of the things that they've really been pushing home about it is like, yeah, it's gonna create another wave. And we can already see that. About a week or two ago, we were sitting at like 9,000 cases a day in America, which is like great. But I just checked right before I got on here. Oh, hold on, it was saying that now we're suddenly having 26,000, or yesterday we had 37,000 cases.
Wow.
or 36,000. And so we are seeing that ramp up again. But the thing is, like, that's happening in places like Florida, where vaccination rates are very low. And this wave is going to hit, but it's not going to hit well-vaccinated places. It's going to seep through the cracks, and it's going to take out communities where social distancing, mask wearing, and vaccination rates, nobody really cares about them. And so I'm really curious to see what happens in places like, like Alabama or Wyoming, or like really thickly populated places of California or Florida. And so, in a place like Portland, vaccination rates are really high. And even though there's no state or federal like mandates on mask wearing, it is still super, super, super commonplace that when you are in a store, to just wear your mask, like when you're on the bus, when you're getting on a plane, when you're in the airport, when I'm going to get groceries or a cup of coffee, I'm just wearing a mask. Cause like, why wouldn't I? It's not like it's much sweat off my back.
Yeah. I think I would speak to Northern Virginia right now. It's gotten to the point where if I go into a store, it's probably 50-50-ish.
Uh-huh.
I wear mine and I'm fully vaccinated. And I shared with individuals, I said, yeah, but I'm around people. I don't know what I might be, retaining and then sharing. I don't want to be the person responsible that you've ended up exposing somebody to that. And also with the variant, I'm not interested in collecting anything.
No, I don't need that.
Yeah, I don't need that. As
Absolutely.
you said, I'll wear my daggone mask, and in certain arenas it will come off. But from a general practice, I do. I wear it when I'm out in public, and I'm hopeful that people will be mindful about that. Definitely get vaccinated. We all learned that what we were supposed to do since kindergarten: wash your daggone hands frequently. Keep your distance. If you're going to cough or whatever, cover it. But really just try to be protective of yourself so that you're also protecting those around you. I am concerned that we've gotten either we've gotten comfortable or we've just conceded that it exists and we're just going to kind of go through it. So I don't know which is the more harmful perspective, but I think we have a combination of that.
In Missoula right now, even though it's a more liberal place, like Montana as a whole, if you wear a mask in a coffee shop or a grocery store, you're gonna get dirty looks. Like there's definitely been like that flip side where maybe 6 months ago somebody walked in without a mask, everybody's staring at him, was like, what the hell are you doing? But nowadays it's more like if you walk into a place with a mask on, people don't like that. This one time I was in Billings in October or November of last year, when I was working on the ambulances. I took I had 12 hours off, and so I went into town, and I went into this one store, and as soon as I stepped inside with my mask on, this guy told me, he was like, hey, you can either be in my store with your mask off or you can leave. And so just like, Jesus, just, it's my choice. I'm not hurting you, and he chalked it down to like security reasons. It's like, oh yeah, I'm going to pull my mask down. And it's like, oh, I'm Osama bin Laden. It's like, no, I'm just some kid. You don't even know me.
Right.
It's not like I'm like robot from it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, that's unfortunate because, as you said, for starters, that's a protective measure. So you would almost want to encourage somebody to be able to do that. And you're not passing judgment, and you're not telling him, hey, I can't come into your store unless you mask up. And he's like, get the hell out. That would be his right. But yeah, that's just interesting. Because I'm concerned about those areas that aren't endorsing or pursuing the vaccinations. Because as you said, you start looking at Florida and there are younger people down there, but the majority of the individuals who are going to be impacted are going to be elderly. We don't want to cull our population in that fashion, right? That's just, we want to do better to be taking care of our parents and our grandparents.
Knock a few years off the average lifespan of an American.
Yeah. Not the way to do it.
Which is bad, which would be bad. Let me go on record on this podcast saying I don't support that.
Yeah, we would cut that damn thing out anyway if you did, because we're like, you're a bucket of crazy. We're not having that. No, we appreciate that. But we appreciate also all that you did while providing that supplemental care, because it really ended up being a time in my lifetime, other than 9/11, that I saw that our country came together in trying to do things that each of us needed to do to try to make it a survival for all.
Mm-hmm.
And it was imperfect, but it was really a great achievement. And I'm hoping that we do not lose that ground.
Can I add I feel like a lot of the stuff I've been saying is kind of sad. Can I add a message of hope real quick?
You're daggone better, along with your call of action.
Okay, wonderful. Something which has occurred to me though is this is just the past 16 months have sucked, and it's probably going to suck for a bit longer. But something which has given me a lot of hope is the fact that people, Nick and I's age, it shows how invested generation like Gen Z and millennials are in issues which hurt everybody. It's I have seen an incredible upwelling of support and unity in younger folks in America. And that for me is just so incredible. And because it's not like that mentality of like, oh, if it's not hurting me, then who gives a shit? Pardon.
Right.
Who cares?
That's French.
It's one
it
of
goes
those
with your
things.
last name.
You know, it's not like this, it's not this like single-minded mentality. It's like, hey, if it's hurting my neighbor, if it's hurting some guy I've never met, like, you know, I want to help them. I want to be there for them. And so I think, yes, this pandemic has shown terrible things that are wrong with the systems in place, but it's also, for me, shown how well people can come together, you know, even if it didn't happen, like, you know, even if we didn't execute it great, like it's given me a lot of faith in how younger generations in America are gonna operate going forward.
Well, I too have that same hope because we did see them become much more vocal, much more engaged, and also much more demanding to hold the older generations accountable. You know, so that really has been an awesome experience that I too have witnessed. So I appreciate you guys a lot for doing that. So, Nick, any questions or comments?
No, I don't think so. I just, the whole time that Copeland was out there on the field, I was just always in awe of the things that he would tell me that he would be doing. You know, I'd be going to classes and I'd work and stuff, but we're the same age, and the things that you have been doing just constantly amaze me and makes me very, very proud to be able to call you a friend. So I appreciate you sharing those stories that I think will inform and empower our communities, you know, here in Loudoun and everyone else that watches this across the country. So I thank you for agreeing to show up and tell these stories.
Thank you, Nick.
So I'm speechless. So I'm going to shut the heck up because I'm not going to top that. So
yeah, that was
Copeland,
good.
Copeland, unless there's something else you want to add, I'm going to sign off. So this is your opportunity as well, as if you have an additional closing comment that you wish to share.
I mean, I'm also a little, I feel like Nick really knocked it out of the ballpark with that one. I just, I feel good, and I feel good about what's going to come. And I am eager to see what happens next. And I'm sure that it's going to be something amazing. And so I have a lot of hope for what's going to occur next. And that's all I got, I guess.
That's a lot that you got, and it's a lot that you gave. So I thank you very much.
Thanks for having me on the show as well. This was, Nick and I were talking about it ages ago, and I was like, that sounds cool as hell. And so I'm really glad that I got to be here, and I'm glad I got to finally meet you.
Well, you have been my pleasure. And it is really, it's so nice to see individuals taking a leap of faith, as well as taking action to be able to do what you said, Copeland, earlier, is when you see somebody else who's got that need, it may not impact you directly, but you make it impact you because that's what you're going to do, is you're going to step in and help your neighbor in your community. So I thank you, and I am all about that. I love the fact that we are able to look beyond ourselves and be able to do that, because at the end of the day, that's what we are all here for, is to be part of a community. So I thank you very much for all that you do and what you've done. Nick, thank you for the introduction, because this was awesome. I really appreciated it. To our viewers, thank you very much for allowing us to be in your space and allowing us to be able to share these stories. You're welcome to follow us on our different social media outlets, and also to suggest or make recommendations as to who you would like to hear from and how we could also better serve our community. Until next week, have a great week and be blessed.